What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and it's time to dive into Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. If you are unfamiliar with this, it is now available in early access digital form. It will not be available in physical copies for you to pick up until December 6th. However, if you pre-ordered something on D&D Beyond, you can get the digital bundle a little bit early. For those of you who also know, I actually received physical copies early as part of being a reviewer for Wizards of the Coast. No money exchanges hands, they just send things over here early. So we're going to be covering a bunch of the Dragonlance related stuff here in the coming days. This video obviously is going to be about the Lunar Sorcerer. So we'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about the Kender race, the new backgrounds, the new feats, the new magic items, the new mundane equipment, which is pretty cool actually, and the new monsters. And that'll pretty much be the majority of things. There is a little bit on sidekicks. We'll talk about those. And I think that's probably going to get us through more or less everything that I'm going to cover. I do still plan to do a separate video talking about the board game. And then I'm also hoping to see exactly how they connect. And that may kind of be our final video to round out our Dragonlance coverage. So without further ado, if you'll see over my left shoulder on the right side of your screen, you'll see we're at 99.7. I'm hoping to hit 100K by the end of next week. I know that seems wild, but we're only about 40 away from 99.8. So if you like this kind of stuff, consider subscribing to the channel. I'm also going to be pulling up the Heroes of Krynn Unearthed Arcana because we did receive 2 Unearthed Arcanas for the Heroes of Krynn, which were the Dragonlance related Unearthed Arcana. So we'll do a side-by-side comparison where possible to get some ideas on what exactly changed. So if we go ahead, first of all, I'll head over here. You could say, here's the Heroes of Krynn Unearthed Arcana. This gave us the Kender. This gave us the Lunar Sorcerer subclass as well as the backgrounds. And then in the version of it, the updated version, the revisited version, we adjusted mostly just the feats and the Kender race. The Lunar Sorcerer was left out of it. So for the purposes of this, we are going to be talking about the Lunar Sorcery subclass, and we'll also take a look at how things shifted or changed from its initial version. I'm going to try to snap this over here so we can get a good look. I will tell you there have been some changes, but for the most part, I think they're warranted. So let's go ahead and take a look. So as you can see, you get Lunar Embodiment at level 1. And basically it says you learn additional spells when you reach certain levels in this class as shown on the Lunar Spells table. Each of these spells counts as a sorcerer spell for you, but doesn't count against the number of sorcerer spells known. So it says full moon, new moon, crescent moon. Now, most of these, if not all of them, received adjustments from the original Unearthed Arcana. So if we go ahead, and pull that up, where do we have it here? You can see originally Full Moon had Fairy Fire, Moonbeam, Death Ward, which was weird because it gave it to us at a level earlier than we could get it, which I think was just a typo. Freedom of Movement, and Mass Cure Wounds. It was nice to see Mass Cure Wounds because typically sorcerers don't have access to healing, so it was nice to have a little bit of that there. Although that is basically entirely shifted, as you can see, to be Shield, Lesser Restoration, Dispel Magic, Death Ward, and Rary's Telepathic Bond. Now, Shield, no one's going to argue with any of these spells, really, and Lesser Restoration, something typically, again, I think Death Ward as well, not normally on the Sorcerer spell list. Neither is Rary's Telepathic Bond, that's I think reserved specifically for the Wizards. But I mean, the fact that it doesn't get Moonbeam at all, the Lunar Sorcerer, does feel a little odd to me. But all in all, I'd say for the most part, I'm okay with the changes. Rary's Telepathic Bond, I think the strength of that spell particularly comes from the ability to be cast as a ritual. And that's not currently a thing a sorcerer can do without, taking feats. The New Moon spells, we currently have a Ray of Sickness, Blindness, Deafness, Vampiric Touch, Confusion, and Hold Monster. Originally, we had Dissonant Whispers, Darkness, Bestow Curse, Evard's Black Tentacles, and Mislead. I will tell you I'm much more of a fan of the original spell list there. Dissonant Whispers is a fantastic spell. So is Evard's Black Tentacles. Basically, we traded that out for in my opinion, a much less useful Ray of Sickness and a situationally useful Vampiric Touch. Hold Monster, solid. It's a great spell. Have it for free is also nice. And then Crescent Moon was originally, or is currently rather, Color Spray, Alter Self, Phantom Steed, Hallucinatory Terrain, and Mislead. We lost out on Sanctuary, which I think, actually Sanctuary can be useful all the way to late game. And it's also a spell typically not available to sorcerers. Originally, again, Sanctuary, Blindness, Deafness, Phantom Steed, Hallucinatory Terrain, and Dream. You can see some of the spells have shifted between the phases. For example, we now have Mislead from New Moon now on Crescent Moon. But I think I preferred the original with the Sanctuary there. His Color Spray, in my opinion, not super useful. Again, nice hallucinatory terrain can be exceptionally useful. Phantom Steed is a situational useful spell, but another one that I feel is benefited from being a ritual spell. But either way. And then we go on to say, whenever you finish a long rest, you can choose what lunar phase manifests its power through your magic. Full moon, new moon, or crescent moon. While in the chosen path, you can cast one first level spell of the associated phase in the lunar spells table once without expending a spell slot. Once you cast it in this way, you can't do so until you finish a long rest. So I would like to point out again, for all of the naysayers out there, you get 15 new spells, 16 if you count the cantrip, in which we'll get to in a second, with this lunar phase. We started adding new extra spells to sorcerers as part of their base feature in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. The Aberrant Mind and the Clockwork Soul both have an extra 10 spells that are auto-learned and don't count against the number of spells prepared for a sorcerer. I think this is the smallest step one can do to improve the sorcerer's overall power. See my previous fixing sorcerer videos. I have 3 of them out here on the channel talking about what could be done. And I think that was the simplest fix, was giving them some auto-prepared spells, making them fall more in line with things like the Cleric, the Paladin, things of that nature. Even Rangers, for the most part, started to get extra spells as well. So nowhere in here does it state that you only have access to these 5 spells while you are in the specific phase. What it does state is that while in the chosen phase, you can cast one first level spell of the associated phase without expending a spell slot. Meaning, if you're in full moon, you can cast Shield. In new moon, you can cast Ray of Sickness. And crescent moon, you can cast Color Spray. It says you learn these spells when you reach certain levels in the class. Each of them counts as a sorcerer spell for you. So when you hit level 1, you learn whatever base level spells you learn as a sorcerer, and then you also have on your sorcerer spell list, unless Wizards of the Coast comes out and proves me wrong otherwise, you will know whatever base sorcerer has, and then also have always known and always prepared Shield, Ray of Sickness, and Color Spray. Those are now in the pool of spells that you can draw from to cast as a first level sorcerer, and that goes on. Now, they did change this feature significantly from the Unearthed Arcana because it used to state whenever you finish a long rest, you can choose what lunar phase manifests, while in the chosen phase, spells of the associated phase in the lunar spells table can be cast without expending a spell slot once you cast a spell in this way. So previously, you would have access to, so say you were in full moon, you could cast Fairy Fire, Moonbeam, Death Ward, Freedom of Movement, and Mass Cure Wounds, each one of those once a day for free. All 5 of those spells once a day for free. Now they have ratcheted it back to just be the first level spell, which I do think led to some of the changes of the first level spells here. For example, Shield. Basically now, if you happen to find yourself in the full moon phase, you have access to a free shield once a day. However, I would have preferred, again, something like Dissonant Whispers like we originally had. So again, I will state this for a final time. As far as I can tell, unless we are specifically told otherwise, you learn all 15 of these spells and you have access to all 15 of these spells on your list of sorcerer spells to cast. You're still limited by the slots that you have, and you can still learn spells as part of leveling up, but these 15 spells have been permanently added to your always known and not counting against the number of spells you know list as a sorcerer. You don't have to be in full moon to cast the full moon spells. You could be in the crescent moon phase as far as your lunar embodiment goes and still cast shield, dispel magic, or whatever from this. The only benefit of choosing a specific phase when you finish a long rest is which one of the first level spells you get to cast for free once a day without expending a spell slot. Later subclass features will also alter that, but here we are at level 1. You also get Moonfire, one of the I feel like it's a subtle but super powerful ability, and I really, really like it. You call down the Radiant Light of the Moon on command. You learn the Sacred Flame spell, which again, you've now added another, the 15 spells above, and then this one cantrip, which doesn't count against the number of sorcerer cantrips you know. When you cast the spell, you can target one creature as normal, or target 2 creatures within range that are within 5 feet of each other. I really like this feature. It kind of gives Sacred Flame sort of the same abilities, kind of like Acid Splash. However, you still have the base abilities of Sacred Flame, like people don't benefit from cover when you're casting Sacred Flame, and it doesn't change the way it works normally if you want to just cast regular old Sacred Flame. Again, radiant damage, something very rarely resisted, and typically something sorcerers, again, Sacred Flame, don't have access to on the regular, possibly the Celestial Sorcerer might if they choose to go that route. But yeah, you can choose to target one creature as you normally would, or if you happen to have another one within 5 feet of it, sure, target 2. And that is, like I said, a very simple way to make a very limited cantrip much more useful. I could see possibly people trying to make the argument that they got rid of the Moonbeam spell off of the list and then gave them Sacred Flame. But as far as I know, Moonbeam itself, let's just go and check here. I believe Moonbeam is not something that sorcerers can cast normally. Let's just double check before I speak out of turn. Yeah, so I would understand the concept of not giving it Moonbeam automatically prepared if Moonbeam was a spell you could choose to take because you wanted to. But really, there is a couple of spells that are specifically tied to the moon, one of them being Moonbeam. And for all I know, that may actually be the only one. And you're not going to give it to this sorcerer? It just feels wrong, right? To not have Moonbeam on the Moon Sorcerer? I digress. Moonfire also, if we were to go ahead and pull up the old Unearthed Arcana, Moonfire is essentially exactly the same. So nothing different there. Next up at level 6, we get Lunar Boons. Now, these, again, tie into our Lunar Embodiment feature. We also, possibly for the first time, no, actually, maybe not. I'm thinking some others. But we actually get 2 features at level 6. So we get 2 at level 1 and 2 at level 6. So this is a pretty stacked subclass in that regards. So we have the following schools of magic are associated with our phase. Full Moon is Abjuration and Divination. New Moon is Enchantment and Necromancy. Crescent Moon is Illusion and Transmutation. Whenever you cast... Wait a minute. Did that just change? Hold on. I have to check something. But I'm pretty sure when I was reading in the book that they actually sent me, this was Illusion and Divination. Interesting. Okay, either way. And then whenever you use a meta magic option on a spell of the school associated with your specific phase that you're in, you can reduce the sorcery points spent by 1 to a minimum of 0, and that's important. We'll get to that in a sec. You can reduce the sorcery points spent for your meta magic a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So, let's go ahead and see how that worked out. It used to be Abjuration and Conjuration, Evocation and Necromancy, and Divination and Transmutation. So they changed it to be Abjuration and Divination and Illusion and Transmutation, as opposed to Divination and Transmutation. And I remember very specifically, I think I have all of my books are in the other room, unfortunately. Right? Yeah. This isn't them. Yeah. So I remember specifically during the live stream that I was confused why they would change full moon to be abjuration and divination when both crescent moon also had it. So I'm guessing apparently that may have been a typo in the physical printed version of the book, and there already is an errata in that it should be illusion and transmutation. So either way, but as I was saying, the important part of that is the sorcery point reduction is to a minimum of 0, which means you can, in theory, depending on the meta magic that you're using, use it without expending a single sorcery point. The only limitation to how often you can do this is proficiency bonus times per long rest. So if you have 5 instances, say you have a proficiency bonus of 5, and you have 5 instances of meta magic that you can use for 1 sorcery point, you can effectively add an additional 5 sorcery points to your pool by using that 1 point meta magic feature, reducing it to 0 via the Lunar Boons ability, assuming that you're casting a spell of the associated type that we see above there. Reduce it to 0 meta magic, effectively not spending it, still get the effect, and then again, once you hit a total of proficiency bonus times per long rest, that ability has to recharge. But one of the biggest things I know a lot of people complain about is that sorcerers use sorcery points for just about everything, similar in a way to a lot of people feel about monk and key points. And it's kind of a big function of your ability to use sorcery points for meta magic, but then a lot of subclass features also use sorcery points. So this basically giving you the ability to use some meta magic without expending anything is a really, really nice feature. And then we also get waxing and waning, which is a nice quality of life thing that as a bonus action, we can spend 1 sorcery point to change your current lunar embodiment phase to a different one. You can now, and they added this clarifying language, you can now cast 1 first level spell from each lunar phase of the lunar spells table once without expending a spell slot, provided your current phase is the same as the lunar phase. Once you cast a lunar phase spell in this way, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest. Meaning, you could start the day, in full moon, cast shield once per day for free, use a bonus action any sorcery point to transfer from full moon to new moon, and then use I didn't say use a bonus action, but yeah, use a bonus action to transfer, and then you could cast Ray of Sickness once a day for free without expending a spell slot. Then use another bonus action and sorcery point to transfer from new moon to crescent moon, and then cast Color Spray once a day for free, once per long rest without expending a spell slot. So essentially, with this level 6 ability, it does cost us sorcery points to transfer from our different phases, but it's nice that it's also a bonus action, allowing us to have action spell casting. And we can also then get access to that 1 first level spell for free. So, like I said, I don't particularly love Color Spray or Ray of Sickness, but the fact that I could cast both of them once a day without expending a spell slot makes them a little more appealing to me. Let's go ahead and look at what changed from the original features. So, again, we already talked about the adjustments to what spell schools there are, but the meta magic feature there was the same. And then as a bonus action, you can spend a sorcery point to change your lunar phase. The only difference here is we did add the clarifying language about the spell casting, which makes sense. At 14, you get lunar empowerment. While you're in your phase, something else happens. If you're in full moon, you can use a bonus action to shed bright light in a 10-foot radius and dim light for another 10 feet. In addition, you and creatures of your choice have advantage on investigation and perception checks while within that 10-foot bright light feature that you have. New moon, you have advantage on dexterity stealth checks. In addition, while you are entirely in darkness, attack rolls have disadvantage against you. I am curious why it specifies while you're entirely in darkness. That's a very odd terminology. But I guess, if you're entirely in darkness, most of the time attack rolls have disadvantage against you anyway, because you would therefore be considered heavily obscured, and most creatures would have disadvantage on attack rolls anyway. I guess this would work for characters with dark vision as well as other senses. So I guess that might be the trade-off there. And then if you're in Crescent Moon, you have resistance to necrotic and radiant damage. Now these received slight tweaks. Originally, it was while you were in the bright light of the full moon one that you had advantage on saving throws. They have changed that to advantage on advantage on investigation and perception checks. I guess this is to give you some more out of combat utility, which I do appreciate because this is a thing that once you choose to have that lunar embodiment active, you can at any point choose to emanate that light and then use it to get the bonus on the investigation or perception checks. That is nice because it does, like I said, add a level of out of combat utility to this class that, for the most part, most of the other ones are combat focused. New Moon, again, was advantage on stealth checks. However, it did originally state while you are in dim light or darkness, attack rolls have disadvantage against you. They have changed it to just be darkness only, and the Crescent Moon resistances remain the same. And lastly, we get Lunar Phenomenon at level 18. As a bonus action, you can tap into your current lunar embodiment phase. Alternatively, which I really like this, as part of the bonus action you take to change your lunar subphase using the waxing and waning feature, you can immediately use this. So let's say you start the day in full moon as a bonus action when you're level 18, you can activate this ability. Or if you decide to spend a sorcery point as a bonus action and transition from full moon to new moon, you can also activate the new moon ability if you see fit. So for full moon, you radiate moonlight for a moment. Each creature of your choice within 30 feet of you must make a con save against your spell save DC or be blinded until the end of its next turn. In addition, a creature of your choice in that same 30-foot area gets 3d8 hit points. New moon is basically the opposite. Same thing, 30-foot radius from you. Dexterity saving throw, and creatures of your choice must make a dexterity saving throw against your spell save DC or take 3d10 necrotic damage and have their speed reduced to 0 until the end of its next turn. Which is pretty good because that's an AoE 3d10 necrotic damage and a speed reduction if they fail. In addition, you become invisible until the end of your next turn or until you immediately after you make an attack roll or cast a spell. So not only is this a big AoE damage, possibly a shutdown thing by shutting down enemies not being able to move, you also turn invisible. And lastly, Crescent Moon, you can magically teleport to an unoccupied space you can see within 60 feet. You can also bring one creature along with you if they're within 5 feet of you. That creature teleports to an unoccupied space of your choice that you can see within 5 feet of your destination. In addition, you and the teleported creature, if you choose to bring one, all gain resistance to all damage until the start of your next turn. Once you use one of these bonus action features, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest, unless you spend 5 sorcery points to use it again. Now, I think for the most part, these are largely the same. Same thing for full moon, con save, blinded, or healing. New moon, AoE shutdown. Yep. And then lastly, the only difference is Crescent Moon. You didn't originally have the opportunity to bring an ally with you or a creature. I think this is a willing creature. You now have the opportunity to do that, and you still have the ability to spend 5 sorcery points to get it back. Overall, I think the Lunar Sorcerer is, you can argue power creep, right, in theory, because it is significantly stronger than any of the other sorcerers out there. But I don't feel like it's that much stronger than some of the other caster classes that are out there. So I think this kind of starts to bring things more in line. I felt particularly strongly about the Aberrant Mind and the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer, to the point where I have said and expressed, and this one as well, where the first time I've actually considered playing a sorcerer in a 5e game. I looked at it in the past, but when I also looked at it compared to something like a wizard and the amount of spells that I'd get to know, and again, fundamentally, metamagic I didn't think changed things too much. I'd rather just play a wizard or a cleric or a druid. So I really appreciate these adjustments. These extra spells at the very least go a long way. And, excuse me, I also think the Lunar Sorcerer has some really interesting concepts for multi-classing. I really like the concept of a level 14 Lunar Sorcerer, level 6 Oath of the Ancients Paladin. I think that could be very interesting with the kind of full moon radius giving you, advantage plus your auras. You could probably have a really interesting combo if you had the stats to make a Lunar Sorcerer Twilight Cleric. Could be very interesting and also very, very potent. But yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the Lunar Sorcery subclass. Do you think it is done well? Do you think it's too much power creep? Have you got a chance to play one, whether in playtest or in a more recent game, and how does it feel? I think it'd actually be really fun to play, and then again, you have that whole concept of you could also, if you wanted to, tie your personality to the phase that you're in, right? If you're in the full moon, maybe you're more forgiving, whereas the new moon is more dark. I don't know. There's opportunities there, and I do like a lot of the abilities as well, so I'm curious. Please let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. Fear not, the top 10 Tuesday, which may or may not come out on this Tuesday, is still coming, even though we're doing Dragonlance coverage. We'll probably jump into, I think, the Kender race in the next video. So if you're looking forward to that, I will see you all next time.